If you love ghost stories, folklore, and all things mysterious, you need to make a trip to Haunted in downtown Tullahoma, Tennessee. Just a short drive from Nashville, this family-owned Gothic shop is filled with the strange, unusual, and downright fascinating. This isn't a big box store full of mass-produced decorations. Haunted specializes in handmade curiosities, Gothic decor, metaphysical supplies, green witchcraft essentials, and unique pieces created by independent artists. Whether you're decorating or just looking for something you won't find anywhere else, Haunted is worth the trip. Visit them on 125 West Lincoln Street in Tullahoma, or shop online at hauntedstore.net. That's right, hauntedstore.net. Haunted, curated for the strange and unusual. There are places in America where history seems to settle into the landscape like a dense morning fog. Places where tragedy and folklore become so intertwined that separating one from another becomes almost impossible. Point Pleasant, West Virginia is one of those places. Today, thousands of people visit that small river town every year. They pose for photographs beside a gleaming 12-foot tall stainless steel statue with crimson eyes. They browse the Mothman Museum, attend lectures by paranormal investigators, and celebrate one of America's strangest legends during the annual Mothman Festival. To many visitors, it's simply another roadside attraction, a fun stop on a weekend road trip. But ask someone whose family lived in Point Pleasant in the late 1960s, and you'll hear a different story altogether. They'll tell you about a year when ordinary people stopped going outside after dark, when police officers answered calls they couldn't explain, when respected citizens insisted they had seen something impossible, and when a small town became convinced that something with glowing red eyes was watching them from the woods just beyond the city limits. Whether the Mothman was an undiscovered animal, a supernatural omen, an extraterrestrial visitor, or simply the product of fear and coincidence, the story that unfolded in Point Pleasant remains one of the most thoroughly documented mysteries in American folklore. Because unlike Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, the Mothman wasn't seen by some hunter deep in the woods. It appeared in neighborhoods, along highways, near homes, in front of dozens of witnesses. And then, just as suddenly as it arrived, it disappeared. But before it did, an entire community would be changed forever. I'm Alan Searcy, the American Haunted Historian, and this is Southern Ghost Stories. Point Pleasant sits at the meeting of two rivers. To the west flows the broad Ohio River, separating West Virginia from Ohio. To the south runs the Kanawha River, winding through the Appalachian hills before joining the Ohio just outside of town. It's a beautiful place. Rolling hills, towering hardwood forests, riverboats, quiet neighborhoods. On the surface, Point Pleasant feels like countless other small American towns. But history has never been kind to this stretch of land. Long before the European settlers arrived, Native American tribes recognized the strategic importance of the river junction. Then in 1774, the land became the site of the Battle of Point Pleasant, one of the bloodiest conflicts fought before the American Revolution. Hundreds of men died along the riverbanks. For generations afterward, local folklore insisted the land had never entirely forgotten the violence. Ghost stories became common. Hunters claimed to hear voices in the woods. Strange lights were occasionally reported over the river. Now, whether those stories held any truth is impossible to know, but they ensured Point Pleasant already possessed an air of mystery long before anyone ever whispered the name Mothman. Ironically, the creature's story wouldn't begin in town. It would begin several miles to the north, inside one of the most strangest abandoned places in America. During World War II, the United States government urgently needed explosives. In 1942, construction began on what became known as the West Virginia Ordnance Works. The complex covered more than 8,000 acres outside Point Pleasant. Thousands of workers manufactured TNT for the war effort around the clock. Because the explosive material was unstable, engineers designed the facility with safety in mind. More than 100 concrete storage bunkers, officially known as magazines, were built across the property. Locals simply called them the igloos. Each bunker sat partially buried beneath thick earthen walls. If one exploded, the surrounding dirt would hopefully contain the blast. Railroad tracks crisscrossed the property. Roads connected miles of warehouses, processing buildings, and storage areas. At its peak, it resembled a small city devoted entirely to making explosives. Then the war ended. Production stopped almost overnight. Workers left. Machinery was removed. Buildings were left abandoned. Nature slowly reclaimed the complex. Roads cracked beneath growing weeds. Roofs collapsed. Windows shattered. Trees pushed through concrete foundations. Rainwater filled old excavation pits, creating ponds and wetlands that attracted migrating birds. By the 1960s, the former ordnance plant had become an eerie maze of abandoned structures, overgrown roads, flooded quarries, and silent concrete igloos. Teenagers drove through them late at night. Hunters explored the woods. Birdwatchers came to the wetlands. But in daylight, many people admitted the place felt wrong. Perhaps it was the isolation. Perhaps it was knowing that thousands of tons of explosives had once been manufactured there. Or perhaps abandoned places simply remind us how quickly civilization disappears when people walk away. Whatever the reason, few locals enjoyed lingering there after sunset. The first strange event occurred only days before America first heard the word Mothman. On November 12, 1966, 5 men were digging a grave in a cemetery near Clendon, roughly 75 miles northeast of Point Pleasant. As they worked, one of the gravediggers glanced toward the trees. Something lifted into the air. Later, all 5 men described seeing a large brown figure flying silently above them. It wasn't an airplane. It wasn't a helicopter. It wasn't anything they'd ever seen before. The creature circled briefly and then disappeared over the treetops. At the time, no one knew what to make of it. Some assumed it was some unusual, strange, large bird. Others simply kept quiet. After all, who wants to admit they saw a monster while digging a grave? The sighting attracted little attention, but in hindsight, many believe that was the beginning. Because 3 nights later, everything changed. It was just after 11:30 on the evening of November 15th, 1966. Roger Scarberry and his wife Linda had spent the evening with friends Steve and Mary Millette. Like countless young couples that era, they decided to go for a drive. Their destination was the abandoned TNT area. The roads were empty, and the old buildings made for interesting conversation. And in rural West Virginia during the 60s, there wasn't many places for young people to go to spend an evening. Roger guided his black Chevrolet along those old deserted roads. The headlights swept across crumbling concrete buildings. Rusted pipes emerged from tall weeds. The abandoned power plant loomed ahead. Then, Roger hit the brakes. Standing beside one of the old generator buildings was something none of them had ever seen. At first, it resembled a man, only it was impossibly tall, nearly 7 feet, broad across the shoulders. Its body appeared gray, or maybe it was brown. The color seemed to shift beneath the headlights. Then, it turned. 2 brilliant red eyes reflected directly into the windshield. Not small points of light, large circles. Later, the witnesses would compare them to bicycle reflectors glowing in the darkness. The creature didn't run. It didn't charge. Instead, it unfolded enormous wings. Mary Mallett later estimated they stretched nearly 10 feet from tip to tip. Without any visible effort, the creature rose into the air. Roger instinctively accelerated. The Chevrolet lurched forward. Steve twisted around in his seat. "It's behind us!" Roger glanced into the mirror. There it was, flying directly over the road, keeping perfect pace with the speeding car. The speedometer climbed, 50 miles per hour, 60, 70, 80. the creature never fell behind. Witnesses later estimated Roger reached nearly 100 miles an hour trying to get away. Still, that thing remained only a short distance behind them. It scarcely flapped its wings. Instead, it seemed to glide effortlessly through the night, occasionally dipping, then climbing again, its glowing red eyes never leaving the fleeing car. The sound frightened them almost as much as the sight itself. Instead of roaring or screeching, the creature emitted a high-pitched squeal, thin, sharp, almost mechanical. Roger never slowed until the lights at Point Pleasant appeared ahead. Rather than driving home, the four terrified friends headed straight to the Mason County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff George Johnson had spent years dealing with accidents, domestic disputes, and occasional prank calls. He expected to hear strange stories from time to time, but this was different. Four frightened young adults stumbling into his office, just visibly shaken. They weren't laughing. They weren't contradicting one another. Each described essentially the same impossible creature. A gray figure, 7 feet tall, enormous wings, brilliant red eyes, capable of flying faster than a car. Johnson later admitted he believed one thing without question. Whatever they had seen, it genuinely terrified them. Whether it had been a bird or an animal, or something no one could identify, he couldn't say. But these weren't people inventing a story for attention. They truly believed what they had witnessed. The next morning, newspapers seized on the bizarre encounter. A reporter searching for a memorable headline borrowed the name of a villain from the popular Batman TV show. From that moment forward, the mysterious creature would forever be known as the Mothman. Most sightings that are unusual disappear after a day or two. Someone mistakes a bear for Bigfoot. A strange light becomes an airplane. Interest fades. The Mothman story, it was the opposite. Within hours of the newspaper article appearing, the phone started ringing. People from across Mason County called to report they'd seen the same creature. A volunteer firefighter claimed he'd encountered a giant bird with glowing eyes. Another driver reported watching a winged figure rise from a field beside the highway. Hunters spoke of hearing strange cries echoing through the abandoned TNT area after the sun went down. Families living near the old government property began keeping their kids indoors after dark, and before long, the people of Point Pleasant realized something unsettling. Roger Scarberry and his friends hadn't seen the only Mothman. They'd simply been the first to tell anybody. For 13 months, the people of Point Pleasant lived with uncertainty. Some claimed to have seen a giant winged creature standing beside lonely roads. Others reported glowing lights drifting over the TNT area. Some insisted mysterious men in black suits questioned them about their experiences, often seeming to know details they had never shared publicly. And then, almost as suddenly as the sightings began, the story started to fade. By December 1967, reports of the Mothman became less frequent. Many residents believed whatever had haunted the countryside had just moved on. Christmas was only a few days away. Downtown Point Pleasant bustled with holiday shoppers. Storefronts displayed with wreaths and lights. Children eagerly counted down the days until Santa Claus was going to come. Life seemed to be returning to normal. No one realized that the event forever linked to the Mothman in Point Pleasant was only moments away. The Silver Bridge had connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to Ohio since 1928. Named for the aluminum-colored paint that covered its steel framework, it stretched more than 2,200 feet across the Ohio River and served as a vital transportation link between the two states. Every day, thousands of vehicles crossed it. People drove to work. Children rode across it to see their family. Truck drivers carried goods between Ohio and West Virginia. To the residents of Point Pleasant, crossing the Silver Bridge was ordinary as walking down Main Street. Few people gave it a second thought. But by the 1960s, America had changed dramatically since the bridge was designed. Automobiles had become much larger and a whole lot heavier. Traffic volumes had increased far beyond what engineers in the 20s could have imagined. The bridge continued carrying the growing load day after day. Its greatest weakness remained hidden from everyone. At approximately 5 o'clock in the afternoon, On December 15, 1967, rush hour traffic filled the bridge. Christmas shoppers were heading home. Parents returning from work. Families planned holiday dinners. Then, without warning, the Silver Bridge collapsed. Witnesses described hearing what sounded like a cannon blast. Steel snapped with explosive force. The entire suspension bridge twisted violently before plunging into the icy Ohio River below. Cars tumbled into the freezing water. Some landed upside down. Others were crushed beneath thousands of tons of collapsing steel. Within less than a minute, the bridge was gone. 46 people lost their lives. 2 victims were never recovered. It remains one of the deadliest bridge disasters in American history. Rescue crews worked through the bitter December cold, searching twisted wreckage and frozen waters for survivors. Families gathered along the riverbanks, hoping loved ones would somehow emerge alive. Many never did. The town that had spent a year talking about mysterious creatures now faced a tragedy no one could explain. Almost immediately, people began asking an unsettling question. Had the Mothman been trying to warn them? Looking back, many residents noticed something peculiar, something odd. Reports of the winged creature virtually stopped after the bridge collapsed. The sightings that occurred regularly through 1966 and 1967 suddenly disappeared. To believers, the timing seemed impossible to ignore. They didn't think the creature caused the collapse. Instead, they believed it appeared as an omen. Throughout history, countless cultures have described supernatural beings appearing before disasters. The Irish tell stories of the banshee crying before a death. Many Native American traditions speak of spirit birds associated with tragedy. European folklore contains numerous tales of ghostly apparitions warning of war, plague, or catastrophe. Perhaps they argue the Mothman belonged to that same ancient tradition. Not a monster, a messenger. Others rejected the supernatural explanation entirely. The National Transportation Safety Board eventually determined the collapse resulted from a catastrophic failure of a single eye-bar, a steel suspension link containing a tiny manufacturing defect that had slowly grown worse over decades. The crack measured less than 1/10 of an inch, and visible during routine inspections. When the eye-bar failed, the bridge's suspension system collapsed instantly. And unlike modern bridges, the Silver Bridge lacked redundancy. One failed component doomed the entire structure. Engineers across the country studied the disaster, leading to sweeping changes in bridge inspection standards throughout the whole country. Thousands of bridges were reevaluated. Many were repaired or straight up replaced. From an engineering perspective, the cause was understood. Yet that explanation never answered another question. Why had so many people reported seeing the Mothman before the collapse, and almost no one afterward? No one explored that mystery more deeply than a journalist named John Keel. Keel spent months interviewing witnesses in and around Point Pleasant. He became convinced that the Mothman wasn't simply some strange animal. Instead, he believed the creature was part of a much larger phenomenon involving UFO sightings, unexplained lights, strange phone calls, psychic experiences, and the mysterious Men in Black. Not Will Smith. In 1975, Keel published The Mothman Prophecies, a book that transformed the Point Pleasant legend into international mystery. Rather than presenting neat conclusions, Keel offered some wild questions. What if strange phenomena weren't isolated events? What if seemingly unrelated paranormal experiences were connected? And what if creatures like the Mothman appeared before disasters throughout history, only to vanish once a tragedy struck? The book remains controversial to this day. Some readers consider it one of the most important paranormal investigations ever written. Others criticize its speculation and lack of definitive evidence. And regardless of where someone stands, Keel ensured the Mothman would never be forgotten. And the legend reached an even wider audience in 2002, when The Mothman Prophecy starring Richard Gere premiered in theaters. The film was inspired by Keel's book, but took significant creative liberties. Rather than simply retelling the eyewitness accounts, it focused on psychological horror surrounding prophecy, lost, and unexplained phenomena. Many viewers assumed the movie accurately depicted the real events. It didn't. The characters were fictional. Timelines were compressed. Conversations were invented. But the film succeeded in introducing millions of people to the mystery of Point Pleasant. For many, it became their first encounter with the Mothman. Today, Point Pleasant embraces the legend. A towering stainless steel statue created by artist Bob Roach stands proudly in the center of town. The Mothman Museum houses newspaper clippings, witness interviews, artifacts, and memorabilia connected to the case. And every September, thousands of visitors attend the annual Mothman Festival. It's gigantic. Researchers present lectures, authors sign books, vendors sell everything from artwork to coffee mugs. But once terrified, a community has become an important part of its identity. Yet despite the popularity, the mystery refuses to die. Because sightings don't end in West Virginia. In fact, around 2011, reports of a large winged humanoid started emerging around Chicago. At first, investigators dismissed the claims. It was a misidentified owl, a sandhill crane, perhaps a large heron. Then another report, and another. Soon, dozens of unrelated witnesses began describing an eerily familiar creature. Tall, gray or black, massive wings, glowing red eyes. Sightings occurred near O'Hare International Airport, where pilots, airport workers, and motorists reported seeing a giant winged flying creature over roadways in the woods. Others came from Lincoln Park and industrial districts on Chicago's south side. Unlike Point Pleasant, there were no bridge collapses tying these sightings together. But there was no singular tragedy. The Mothman has since been reported in other places as well. Witnesses have claimed encounters in Ohio, Texas, even overseas. And most are impossible to verify, and many undoubtedly stem from the legend itself. Once people know the Mothman is supposed to look like, ordinary experiences can take on extraordinary meanings. That's the nature of folklore. Stories evolve, they spread, and they become part of the landscape. So, what was the Mothman? Was it a large bird, seen under unusual circumstances? Was it an elaborate case of mass hysteria fueled by newspaper headlines? Was it some strange animal that disappeared before anyone could capture it? Or was it something humanity has encountered throughout history under different names? A harbinger, an omen, a messenger appearing before tragedy. After nearly 60 years, no one knows. But one thing is certain. The people of Point Pleasant weren't trying to create a legend. They were trying to explain something they believed they had seen with their own eyes. And perhaps that's why the story endures, not because of what Mothman was, but what it represents. The uncomfortable realization that even in our modern world, there may be some mysteries waiting in the darkness. And somewhere, on a lonely road, beside an abandoned building, or gliding silently across the sky, someone may once again look up and see two glowing eyes staring back at them. And if you enjoyed today's episode, check out my book, Fear and Folklore, American Monsters, where I dive deep into the folklore of creatures like Bigfoot, Mothman. It's a wild, crazy book about just the creatures that are said to haunt America. So also, check out the new book, Pistols at Red River, the Andrew Jackson Doolan story. I talk about it every week, but it's done really well. Some book clubs have picked it up. Crazy time to be alive in 1806. Men could go out in the field and shoot each other, settle their differences. And have you guys been to Monster City Madhouse yet? MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Man, that gravestone shirt, it's a whole lot of fun. Featuring a mashup of Tombstone and the Universal Monsters, this Monster City Madhouse exclusive shirt is made from a comfortable 60/40 polyester cotton blend. With quotes like, "I'm your Huckleberry, and hell's coming with me," you'll be ready to unleash monster justice. And use promo code SAVE10. That's right, promo code SAVE10 at MonsterCityMadhouse.com gets you 10% off your order. So be sure to like Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook and Instagram. And you can send your questions for the future Q&A shows, southernghoststories@gmail.com. And please be sure to leave a review over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'm trying to get to 150 Apple Podcast reviews and 100 at Spotify for October. So anyway, I appreciate you guys listening, and I will see you guys back again on Monday. If you love ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, and everything that goes bump in the night, Then mark your calendars for the West Kentucky Paranormal Expo, happening September 26 in Mayfield, Kentucky at the Mayfield-Graves County Fairgrounds. This incredible one-day event brings together some of the biggest names in the paranormal community, including Aaron G. Thompson from Netflix's 28 Days Haunted, Jimmy and Jeffrey from Outlaw Paranormal, The Wyndham Bros, Josh Morris, Michael Huntington, Rachel Ravensville, and many, many more special guests and speakers. Your admission is just $15, and that gets you an all-day come-and-go wristband so you can explore at your own pace. Browse more than 35 vendors, enjoy delicious food trucks, attend speaker presentations and panels, meet investigators, hear incredible stories, and dive into the worlds of hauntings, cryptids, UFOs, and the unexplained. Whether you're a seasoned ghost hunter or just curious about the mysteries that surround us, there's something for everyone at the West Kentucky Paranormal Expo. Tickets are on sale now. For more information, visit West Kentucky Paranormal Expo on Facebook and get ready for one of the most exciting paranormal events of the year. We'll see you in Mayfield on September 26th. Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing is available.